Picture this. You are standing in the shadows of this massive, cold stone cathedral, or maybe an ancient open-air temple.
Oh, setting the scene right away.
Exactly. The air is incredibly thick with incense, like so heavy you can actually taste it. At the center of the room, a ruler kneels before a sacred altar.
Right, with priests draped in those elaborate ceremonial robes chanting in the background.
Yeah, and then they slowly lower this crown one that's forged in fire and just dripping with symbolism right onto the ruler's head. And the massive crowd around them isn't even cheering yet.
They're just watching.
Yeah, watching in this breathless, absolute silence.
It's an image that instantly commands reverence, and what's really compelling about it is that if you zoom out from that single image, you see it repeating.
Repeating everywhere, right?
Exactly, almost frame for frame across completely disconnected human civilizations throughout history.
And that striking, repeating image is exactly why we are here today. So welcome to your custom-tailored deep dive. We are unpacking a fascinating research dossier titled Episode 6, The Theology of Power.
It is quite the read.
It really is. Our mission today is to explore how humans have historically used the concept of the divine to, build, justify, and maintain social hierarchies.
Right, looking at the real historical frameworks in human psychology.
Yeah, and then we're going to use the fictional universe of the book San Vitae, The Awakening, as a sort of narrative backdrop to see these exact concepts in action.
Because the premise laid out in our sources is stark. Before rulers claimed armies, they claimed the gods.
Which is wild to think about. But why?
Well, it's an incredibly pragmatic strategy when you think about the actual mechanics of power. Physical force is expensive.
Right. You have to pay people.
Exactly. Armies require feeding, weapons degrade, and soldiers can mutiny if they're unhappy. But theological power, that operates on an entirely different plane.
Because it's invisible.
Because it's sacred. When a ruler's authority is framed as sacred, questioning the throne ceases to be a mere political grievance. It becomes a sin.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that is a huge leap.
It is. So today, we are going to look under the hood at the deeply ingrained human psychological architecture that allows raw political ambition to be, transmuted into something untouchable.
And we see this trope in fantasy movies all the time, right?
Yeah.
The high priest crowning the king. But the dossier makes it really clear this wasn't just some European medieval phenomenon.
Oh, not at all.
Diverse civilizations, separated by massive oceans and thousands of years, independently invented the exact same political tool. So why does this blueprint show up everywhere?
It shows up everywhere because it solves a universal problem, the problem of legitimacy.
Meaning why you get to be the boss.
Right. Anyone can seize power with a sword. But keeping it? That requires the population to believe you actually deserve to be there.
Let's look at how different cultures engineered this, because the dossier gives some great examples.
Yeah, let's start with ancient Egypt. The pharaohs weren't merely seen as political administrators who were favored by the heavens. The theology positioned them as literal living gods.
Right, they weren't just in charge, they were divine.
Their authority was a structural, cosmic necessity. The societal belief was that the pharaoh was the linchpin holding back the forces of chaos.
So if the pharaoh failed,
or if the people rebelled, the sun wouldn't rise and the Nile wouldn't flood.
So the political messaging is essentially, obey me or the universe collapses.
Pretty much.
That is quite the re-election campaign. Obey or no sun tomorrow.
It's incredibly effective. But the dossier points out that not all of these divine mandates were structured identically.
That's a really crucial distinction, actually. Contrast Egypt with ancient China's concept of the mandate of heaven.
Right, the mechanic there are fascinating.
Because the mandate wasn't tied to a specific bloodline forever. It was this idea that a ruler's power was granted by the cosmic order, but, and this is the key difference, it was conditional.
Conditional on what, exactly?
Well, if an emperor became corrupt or tyrannical, the heavens would signal their displeasure.
Through what, like natural disasters?
Yeah, natural disasters, famines, or even successful peasant rebellions.
Wait. So the Chinese system actually had a built-in theological loophole for revolution.
It totally did.
So if a rebellion succeeded, that was just retroactive proof that the emperor had lost the mandate.
Exactly. It justified the current ruler while simultaneously providing a framework for the next dynasty to claim power.
That is a highly sophisticated theological mechanism.
Right. And then, if we move over to Europe, we see the divine right of kings emerge prominently.
And that one is a bit different.
Yeah, this framework completely stripped away the conditionality. It explicitly stated that monarchs derived their authority directly from God.
Meaning they answered to no one else.
Absolutely no earthly authority, no parliament, no populace, and theoretically not even the church could hold them accountable.
So it's basically the ultimate celebrity endorsement.
Yeah, pretty much.
But in this case, the celebrity is the omnipotent creator of the universe. I mean, if you are an ordinary peasant, how are you supposed to argue with that?
You can't. You can't exactly file a grievance with the cosmos.
You really can't. Which brings us to another layer of this architecture that the dossier talks about, the chosen people narratives.
Oh, right. Because rulers don't just elevate themselves, do they?
No, they often elevate their entire demographic. The sources detail how various civilizations used theology to create a moral hierarchy that perfectly justified a political one.
Like elevating your own group to be above everyone else.
Exactly. We see this historically with ancient Israelites framing their society around a divine covenant, or Islamic caliphates positioning themselves as the ultimate earthly guardians of divine law.
And the Christian empires too, right?
Yes, claiming explicit spiritual superiority to justify massive colonial conquests. The overarching rule across all these cultures really boils down to one equation.
Which is?
To rebel against the throne is to declare war on the heavens.
Which makes total sense why a ruler would desperately want this setup. It's like the ultimate security system for a throne.
Oh, absolutely.
But what I don't fully grasp is the perspective of the average person. I mean, if you are starving in the dirt while the state drafts you to build a giant gold pyramid, why don't you just revolt?
It's the million-dollar question.
Like, are everyday people actually submitting to the ruler out of genuine, heartfelt belief? Or is this just a massive psychological hostage situation where they are paralyzed by the threat of eternal punishment?
Well, it is so tempting to look back and just assume ancient populations were gullible or entirely coerced by threats.
Right, that's the easy answer.
But the reality of human psychology is a lot more nuanced. To understand the genuine belief aspect, we really have to look at the profound psychological void that these theological structures fill.
Okay, what kind of void?
Human beings have an intense, innate need to find meaning in their suffering. We are desperate for order in a chaotic world.
And for the vast majority of human history, the world has been an incredibly chaotic, violent, and unpredictable place for the average person.
Exactly, which is the perfect environment for this psychology to take root. Just imagine your crops fail, or a plague sweeps through your village.
Terrifying.
The idea that the universe is random, cold, and simply doesn't care about you is existentially terrifying.
Yeah, nobody wants to believe that.
But if a ruler or a priesthood steps in and says, hey, this suffering has a cosmic purpose, it is part of a grander divine plan.
And if you just follow the rules, it'll all be okay.
Yes. If you follow these sacred laws, order will be restored. That narrative is immensely comforting. It offers predictability.
So rulers aren't just selling oppression then. They are selling psychological relief.
That's a great way to put it.
They tap into the fear of cosmic punishment, sure, but they are primarily weaponizing the human desire for moral clarity.
Yes. And the deep need to belong to a sacred story. By framing the social hierarchy as something cosmic and intentional rather than just raw, unfair exploitation, the myth drastically reduces societal anxiety.
It takes the sting out of inequality.
It really does. The psychological result is that people aren't merely obeying a man with a crown. They are submitting to a structure that gives their daily struggles actual meaning.
It makes obedience feel righteous.
Exactly.
Which brings up a massive philosophical divide, which the dossier tackles head on. Because this psychological hook is so incredibly effective, we have to ask the chicken and egg question of power.
Right. Does the authority flow down or is it built up?
Yeah. Does this authority actually flow down from the heavens, or is this entire system a brilliant, calculating human invention?
That is the defining debate of political theology, and the sources lay out the two primary arguments impartially.
Let's break them down.
Argument 1 posits that the divine is an objective reality. In this framework, the universe inherently possesses a moral structure.
Okay.
Rulers are either genuinely chosen or at least permitted to rule by the divine in order to maintain that cosmic order. Therefore, civic obedience is not just a legal requirement, it is a strict spiritual duty.
Okay, I track with that. But then the dossier introduces argument 2, which completely flips the board.
It really does. Argument 2 asserts that power is entirely a human construction from the ground up.
So no divine mandate at all.
None. In this view, gods are not speaking from the heavens to anoint kings. Rather, gods are a reflection of human fears, human hopes, and specifically, human political needs.
So sacred authority, under this lens, is nothing more than elaborate political theater designed to protect the elite.
Precisely.
It's like a reverse engineering of authority. You figure out what terrifies people, like famine and chaos, and you figure out what comforts them, like a protective father figure.
Yep, you identify the levers.
And then you build a deity around those exact emotional buttons and conveniently claim you are the deity's sole earthly spokesperson.
Reverse engineering is exactly the right framework here, and this is heavily explored in the dossier through the lens of 19th century philosophers like Ludwig Feuerbach and Friedrich Nietzsche.
I remember Feuerbach, he had that whole projection theory, right?
Yes. Feuerbach introduced the concept of projection theory. He argued that humans take their own highest ideals, justice, power, wisdom, and their deepest fears, and they project them onto a massive cosmic screen.
Like a movie projector.
Exactly like that. We call that projection God, and then we bow down to it, completely forgetting that we are the ones running the projector in the first place.
Humans did not make gods in their image. They made gods in their own. That is a profound way to summarize it.
It really captures the essence of his argument.
So how does this incredibly abstract philosophy look when it is actually operationalized?
To visualize these mechanics, our sources actually connect these theories directly to the world building in the fictional universe of San Vitae, The Awakening.
Right, which serves as a brilliant narrative laboratory for everything we've just discussed.
It really does. In the world of San Vitae, we are introduced to a ruling class known as the Santori elite.
And they don't just happen to be religious, do they?
No, not at all. They use theology as a calculated, structural tool of domination. Their entire society is built on specific rituals, overarching myths, and sacred symbols.
But the dossier emphasizes that in this fictional world, the gods did not descend to hand the Santori their power.
Right.
The theology rises entirely from the political needs of the elite. It is Feuerbach's projection theory made literal.
And we see the specific mechanics of how they do this. The Santori justify their dominance through a mythos that functions exactly like ancient divine kingship.
They elevate their own political ideology to a sacred status.
Exactly. But it goes further than just the ruling class. The sources also detail the actions of the Humanis purebloods within the story.
Right, and they use purity narratives to justify some intense violence.
Very intense.
Let's clarify some of the terminology from the book here, just because it highlights exactly how this weaponization works. The Humanis purebloods are hunting populations referred to as the San and the Sans Vitae.
Right.
What do those terms actually mean in the context of this world's theology?
Well, in the universe of San Vitae, the term San generally refers to those possessing a specific vitality, magic, or elevated spiritual status favored by the elite.
Okay, so they have the magic essence.
Yes. And the Sans Vitae, which literally translates to without life or without vitality, are those who lack this essence.
Got it.
But the Humanis purebloods don't just view the Sans Vitae as a lower economic class. They use their sacred texts to classify them as spiritually contaminated and metaphysically devoid.
Which completely changes the psychology of the persecution.
It changes everything.
It's no longer just political oppression. It becomes a holy obligation.
Precisely the point. By labeling a group impure, the Humanis aren't just committing violence. They believe they are performing a cleansing ritual.
Right.
It is a dark, fictional reflection of how historical chosen people narratives turn genocidal. Dehumanization is incredibly easy when you have a sacred permission slip.
But wait, I have to push back on the sustainability of this entire architecture.
Okay, go ahead.
We just spent 20 minutes talking about how this theology is essentially a psychological cage built to keep people in line. It's brilliant, sure, but isn't it also incredibly fragile?
Fragile in what way?
Well, if the Santori and the Humanis rely on this weaponized faith to maintain their hierarchy, doesn't their entire empire collapse the very second the oppressed population stops believing the myth?
That's a great point.
Like, if the power is an illusion, what happens when the audience realizes it's a trick and just walks out of the theater?
You've just identified the Achilles heel of any theological power structure.
Ah, okay.
And it is exactly why these systems inevitably evolve into sprawling architectures of physical oppression.
Because the belief isn't enough on its own.
Right, because you are absolutely correct. If the belief falters, the power evaporates. A ruling class cannot rely on voluntary faith alone forever.
So how do they keep the cage locked once the belief fades? I mean, people are going to wake up eventually.
They reinforce the crumbling myth with tangible terror. They implement mass surveillance. They normalize public violence against dissenters.
Making an example out of people.
Exactly. Over time, they induce a state of learned helplessness in the underclass. The rulers make the cost of disbelief so incredibly high, so psychologically and physically terrifying, that the populace will continue to perform the rituals of belief simply to survive.
So they go through the motions of worship just to avoid the executioner.
Yes, exactly. And over generations, that mandatory performance becomes internalized. The trauma basically does the work that the theology used to do.
That is heavy.
There is a deeply poignant line from the character Sharina in the book that encapsulates this perfectly. She says, "They don't need chains when the fear does the binding."
Oh, man. They don't need chains when the fear does the binding.
Right. The myth initially builds the cage, but eventually the sheer terror of stepping out of line is what locks the door.
The myth creates the cage, and the fear locks the door. That is incredibly bleak.
It is bleak, yes.
But this actually brings us to a major turning point in the dossier. After laying out all this historical and fictional evidence of theology being used as an ultimate weapon of oppression, the sources make a really surprising argument.
Yes, they pivot quite a bit here.
They claim that theology itself is fundamentally a neutral tool. Now, you're losing me a bit here. How can the exact same psychological architecture that builds the cage suddenly be considered neutral?
It definitely seems contradictory until you look at the actual mechanics of meaning-making.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, think about the very same psychological forces that demand devotion, that offer moral clarity, and that frame human struggle within a cosmic narrative.
Same forces we talked about earlier.
Yes. Those forces can be harnessed to liberate just as effectively as they can be harnessed to oppress. Faith really is a double-edged sword.
I think I need an example of how that actually works in practice. How do you use the oppressor's tool for liberation?
Let's contrast the oppressive uses we've outlined, like purity laws, divine kingship, spiritual censorship, with historical movements of religious liberation.
Okay.
A prime example highlighted in our sources is liberation theology, which gained massive traction in Latin America during the 20th century.
What are the actual mechanics of liberation theology? Like, how does it differ from the theology of the elite?
It's all about perspective. Instead of reading sacred texts from the perspective of the king looking down from the palace, liberation theologians read the exact same texts from the perspective of the marginalized looking up from the slums.
Oh, wow. So reading it from the bottom up.
Exactly. They argued that the divine is not a backer of the status quo or just a silent observer of earthly kings.
Right.
Rather, the divine is an active participant in the struggle of the poor against systemic injustice. God isn't found in the crown. God is found in the resistance.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It completely undercuts the divine right of kings using its own vocabulary.
Exactly. It uses the same texts to argue the exact opposite conclusion. The dossier also points to the foundational tenets of Buddhism as another example.
Right, which emphasize the rejection of ego-driven power and material attachment.
Exactly. And this philosophical stance completely dissolves the foundation of vertical dominating ambitions.
Because it just rejects the premise altogether.
Right. If earthly power is an illusion that merely causes suffering, then an emperor's claim to absolute authority is just a manifestation of profound ignorance.
That's a great point. And the sources also mention indigenous cosmologies, right?
Yeah.
How do they factor into this?
Indigenous frameworks frequently emphasize balance, reciprocity, and an interconnected web of life.
Rather than a vertical hierarchy where a deity sits at the top and delegates domination downward.
Precisely. In these cosmologies, the sacred is inherently horizontal. It is found in harmony with nature and equality among beings, not in some mandate to conquer and extract.
So we arrive at this fascinating paradox. The exact same religious scriptures, the exact same words printed on a page, can be wielded to justify the brutal, unquestionable reign of a dictator.
Yes.
Or they can be used to fuel the righteous fire of a revolutionary movement.
Which is an incredible duality.
It is.
Yeah.
Which really begs the question, does the text itself even matter? Or is religion just an empty vessel, a hollow megaphone that humans pour their own pre-existing political intentions into, depending entirely on who currently holds the microphone?
That is the ultimate philosophical provocation of this entire subject.
It's the big question.
Yes. If you view theology through the lens of human sociology, the text is indeed a vocabulary of absolute authority.
Right.
When an elite ruler holds the microphone, they highlight the passages concerning obedience, divine right, and the wrath of cosmic punishment.
Naturally, because it serves them.
Exactly. They use the vocabulary of the sacred to build walls and justify their hoarded wealth.
But when the oppressed manage to seize that same microphone,
When the marginalized claim that exact same vocabulary, they highlight the passages about profound justice, about the divine favoring the meek over the mighty.
and about righteous, necessary rebellion against tyranny.
Exactly. They use the vocabulary of the sacred to tear the walls down. The psychological power of the sacred remains a constant. It always provides ultimate meaning, immense courage, and absolute justification.
But the direction in which that power is aimed depends entirely on human agency.
Yes, it
Right.
all comes back to who is wielding it.
It all comes back to us. We are the architects of our own cages and the blacksmiths of our own keys.
That's a very poetic way to put it.
Well, it brings us to the core thesis of this entire deep dive for you, our listener. Theology, whether viewed as divine truth or human invention, is undeniably one of humanity's oldest and most potent tools for shaping power.
Unquestionably.
When rulers claim the gods, they claim the unquestionable. They wrap their deeply human flaws, their greed, and their political ambitions in impenetrable sacred armor.
But, as human history proves, and as the characters fighting for their survival and freedom in San Vitae show us, that sacred armor is ultimately an illusion.
Because it's human-made.
Exactly. When we recognize that political authority masked as divine mandate is human-made, when we pull back the curtain and see the psychological machinery operating the projector, we reclaim our inherent right to question it.
We strip the rulers of their cosmic immunity.
Yes, and we reclaim the freedom to choose our own truths rather than having them handed down to us from a manufactured heaven.
That is so powerful. And look, you might not live under an ancient pharaoh demanding you build a pyramid to guarantee the sunrise.
Probably not.
And you might not live under the fictional, terrifying purity laws of the Santry elite. But make no mistake, modern society has its own sacred narratives.
We absolutely do.
We have our own unquestionable truths that we are conditioned to simply accept without pushback.
Things we just assume are the natural order.
Right. So we want to leave you with a final lingering question to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. If you stripped away the unquestionable myths of your own workplace, the deeply ingrained narratives of your culture, or the foundational assumptions of your daily institutions, what invisible crowns are you currently bowing to without even realizing it?